Welcome back to the Executive Excel podcast. I'm Tammy, your host, and today we're going to dive into a topic that, let's get real, far too many people have had to deal with in the past or are dealing with right now. And that's the notion of navigating the workplace when you report to a narcissistic style leader. So while this episode is primarily going to focus on the workplace dynamics, the strategies I'm going to bring to the table today could be relevant in other areas of our life as well. So whether that's an executive, a manager, or someone in another powerful position, the reality is that narcissistic leaders do in fact exist. And when you find yourself under their control, it can feel like there's no way out. But here's the truth. There are always ways for you to reclaim your power. And there are ways to navigate this kind of leadership without losing yourself in the process. And that's what we're going to cover today. So if you've ever felt manipulated, gaslit, or just exhausted trying to manage up with someone who thrives on creating chaos and on control, this episode is for you. Let's get into it. Welcome to the Executive Excel podcast. I'm Tammy, your host, an executive coach and heart breath guide who's absolutely passionate about leadership wellness. If you're a leader who's completely exhausted, stressed out, and feeling like you've forgotten how to breathe, you are not alone. In the high-stakes world of leadership, the pressure to perform can be absolutely relentless. This podcast is your space to pause, exhale, and finally connect with solutions to help you live a more peaceful and joy-filled life. Each week, we talk with coaches, counselors, and wellness experts to bring you simple, actionable strategies that will help you to reclaim your well-being, build resilience, and lead with clarity. So, take a deep breath and let's get started. Welcome back, folks. I'm still struggling with a bit of a cold or virus rather, so my voice isn't 100%, but here we are, folks. I wanted to talk about narcissistic leadership today, the traits and the impact that it can have. And I want to clearly articulate as well that this is not the psychological definition of narcissistic personality disorder that we're working with. I am not a therapist. I'm not in psychology. I'm not a psychiatrist. But I do have, unfortunately, a ton of experience with these kinds of personality traits because my father was a narcissist. And I also have worked under a number of narcissists over the course of my career. So first, it's really important that we define what we're dealing with when we talk about narcissistic leadership. Narcissistic leadership is not about confidence. It's not about ambition. It's solely about power, manipulation, and control. So if you want to know whether or not your leader is in fact a narcissist, I want you to pay attention to these traits and check the box for those that fit. The first is that they need constant admiration. They have a very fragile ego, and they expect endless praise. They want gratitude for everything they give you and will beat you over the head with all the things that they do for you. They like to take credit, but avoid at all costs accountability for their decisions. So if something goes right, it's about them. They did it. Their initiatives, their policies, their decisions were the reason for that success. But if something goes wrong, it's the organization, it's the scapegoat, it's someone else's fault, never theirs. They gaslight. Now, this is something that my father and other leaders that I worked with were particularly good at. They'll rewrite history and make you question your own reality. You'll hear things like, you're being too sensitive. You're overreacting. This is not a big deal. You are very emotional. They'll use phrases like, that's not what I meant. You misunderstood me. Another trait that they'll have is that they thrive on chaos. If there's no drama, they will create it, partly because they want to be seen as the saviors who come and take care of the chaos or who end the drama. So they create the chaos so that they can end the chaos and paint themselves the savior in that entire story. And the final thing I want to bring to the table today around traits is that they do not handle criticism well. In fact, any constructive feedback is seen as a personal attack on themselves. So what this translates to is a leader who then exercises their leadership position of power to undermine the people who challenge them or who have provided constructive feedback. I have a personal example around this where we had a leader who was acting very irrationally and irresponsibly with respect to many of the files we were leading as a group. And I would challenge this individual pretty regularly, privately and otherwise. And so what happened was this person then felt attacked by me and went on basically a rampage to try to discredit me as a leader and to try to tell people how incompetent I was and so on, and trying to build a case against me. But what happened was actually I was able to substantiate, and we're going to get down to some tactical strategies in a minute, but I was able to substantiate this person's attack on me, the counterattack, and go after them, if you will, using the organizational rules, ethics and values statements, as well as the policies of the organization to justify my challenging that individual. And eventually that individual was, in fact, involved in a multi-person complaint. And I was a key witness in the complaint process against that particular leader. The impact of all of this, the impact of all of these behaviors, all of these traits can lead to stress and burnout and decision fatigue. And probably the most dangerous thing that this actually happens to create in an organization or in a country or in any other location where narcissists are involved or are a thing is it increases the growing sense of powerlessness amongst those that are there. So you start to question yourself, you start to walk on eggshells, and you lose your own sense of agency. So in this podcast today, I really want to shift the focus, because the goal here is not to fix them, because you're not going to ever do that. It's rather to learn how to outmaneuver them so that you can start taking control back of your own personal experience. So again, I'm going to bring this back to the table because it's really important that we talk about this. The first truth bomb is that you cannot and will never fix a narcissistic leader. Full stop. So I see a lot of smart, capable professionals thinking, well, maybe if I explain things differently, they'll finally get it. Or if I just prove my worth, they'll respect me. Or if I just give them what they want, right? Narcissists don't operate on reason. They operate on control. The more you try to make them see the light, the more tangled you get in their game, the more you're giving them. So the goal is not to change them, right? It's to change how you engage with them. So let's talk about how to do that. So the first thing is really important here, especially in the workplace, folks, is document everything. I mean, document. Narcissists love rewriting history. So your best defense is a paper trail. It is no secret to anyone who works with a narcissistic person that the first thing they're going to want to do is eliminate any approvals that require a paper trail or paper signature. In fact, all paper ways of doing things, whether that be electronically or otherwise, will be dismantled because they do not want to be held accountable. So make sure that you force the notion of documenting everything. Keep records of all decisions, all emails, all conversations. And by the way, I was in a very toxic environment, and I created a separate folder to actually protect myself. And I also printed every single thing I had, and I kept it in a locked cabinet so that narcissist, even if things got erased electronically in some way, shape, or form, I had paper versions to prove the conversations, the decisions, the everything. So you want to be sure that you have everything you need to support yourself so that you cannot be manipulated later. Confirm any and all discussions in writing. So just recap your conversation. So when you're done having a conversation with a narcissistic leader, you go back to your desk and you immediately send them an email. As per our conversation dated on this date at this time, we agreed on XYZ. Let me know if I've misunderstood your statement, as this is my running comprehension of our discussion and the outcomes or the next steps. Okay, so make sure that you actually confirm every discussion in writing. And the final thing I'm going to say about documentation is if it feels off, write it down. So timestamp notes can be a lifesaver. And in the case where someone starts to build a case against you because they're going on the counterattack, you're going to need everything timestamped so that if you have a union or if you have a lawyer, you will be able to share all that information with those people. The second really important tactic, and it's one of the harder ones, folks, is setting boundaries and limiting emotional exposure. This is one I was really challenged with as a child with my father. I often took the bait and I ended up playing into his games. As an adult with my abusive ex, who was also narcissistic in nature and toxic, And then in the workplace as an employee to narcissistic leaders, I fell into the same, unfortunately, the same things, because problem is that narcissists thrive on your emotional reactions. In fact, there are studies that demonstrate that narcissists do not, when they manipulate someone and there's an emotional reaction, it actually triggers their pleasure center. They actually thrive on it. They gain positive reinforced feedback when they manipulate you and you react emotionally. It actually makes them feel good, which is really disturbing, but it's a fact. So if you feed into their drama, they're just going to keep coming in for more. The more you feed a narcissist, the worse they get as far as that goes. So you're going to want to use what's called a gray rock method, which means when they talk to you, you need to remain as neutral as possible, as uninteresting and as uninterested as you can be, and as unreactive as you can possibly be. I have a specific example around this. Again, as an executive, I had a colleague who was demonstrating narcissistic personality traits with their staff and with their colleagues and with myself. And this person was constantly trying to get me to bite or take the bait. And at this point, I had become quite expert at dealing with narcissism to the point where I was actually quite cool, calm, collected, and neutral most of the time. There were days when I cracked, but most of the time I was able to keep it under control. And therefore, I had senior management sort of on my side with respect to some of the perspectives. And when this person went on the counterattack, this individual was looking like the person who was being irrational and a little bit overzealous in their counterattack. One day, this individual called me and was trying to manipulate me and coming onto their side and was triangulating and using all the tactics to try to get me to believe in what they were saying and come on board. And I just bluntly asked, what is it I can help you with today? And they were like, well, I'm looking for such, such, and such. And I said, yeah, I'm not buying into that. I'm not playing games. I don't play games. So can you just bluntly tell me what it is you're looking for today? And I'll see if I can help you. And I was very neutral, very nonchalant. There was no anger, no agitation. And this person's response to me was, well, you're no fun. That was the exact demonstration of I was not buying into their game and I wasn't taking the bait, and they got upset with me because I wasn't taking the bait and called me no fun. And immediately within like 2 minutes was done talking to me and said, well, I guess this is going nowhere, and hung up the phone. So my point being is that when you set boundaries and you limit your emotional exposure by using this gray rock method, you are going to destabilize them because they don't know how to behave when a person doesn't take the bait. So you're not going to want to engage in personal battles. You're going to want to keep things strictly professional as much as possible. And if they lash out, which by the way, they do sometimes when they don't get what they want, they start to lash out, resist the urge to defend yourself emotionally and stick to the facts. Fact check, fact check, fact check constantly. And it might be overwhelming because narcissists tend to throw a lot of nonsense at you. But the reality is you need to stick to the facts. I do want to mention one little thing here is the notion that narcissists never tease, they test. I've seen this with my father. I've seen it with my ex. I've seen it with my bosses. I'm seeing it in geopolitics. Narcissists do not tease, they test. They test to see what the limits of the boundaries are that they can push to get what they want. So ensuring that you maintain those boundaries and do not budge from them, and then document the discussion and the pushback on those boundaries is going to be a key part of defending yourself, your organization, etc. Because again, narcissists never tease, they never joke, they always test. The third tactic or strategy you're going to want to take here is seeking allyship. So there's strength in numbers when dealing with this kind of leader. So one of the narcissist's biggest tactics is isolating, dividing, and conquering. That's what they do. They isolate. The antidote is to build alliances. So find trusted colleagues who see the same patterns, who are seeing what you're seeing and get what you're saying. Support one another in meetings. If they try to gaslight one of you, then back each other up. I had a conversation with a client around this, is if a toxic leader starts to ostracize or try to divide and conquer the room, it is the responsibility of all of you to have each other's backs. If you need to escalate concerns, do it as a group. Don't do it in isolation, because one voice can be dismissed, but if there's multiple voices, it's a lot harder to ignore. This strength in numbers thing applies to any, and I mean any, organization or situation where narcissistic leaders are at the helm. The fourth is managing up and redirecting the focus. So you have to remember that a narcissist only cares about their own image. So if you need something from them, you have to frame it in the terms of their benefit, right? We have to see, they're going to want to know, what is it in it for me? What am I getting out of this? If I do this for you, what does this mean? So instead of saying, I need more resources from my team, you could say, well, if we added more resources, it would make the project more successful under your leadership. We would successfully be able to achieve X, Y, Z and you as a leader will be seen as this great leader if you're able to do so. You want to use their ego against them, but clearly you're going to have to do this strategically and not overuse this tactic. There's a bit of a negative to this tactic though. I use this with my father, and I used to always tell people that there was a price to asking for something from my father. So the price sometimes was too high for me. I didn't want to pay the price of what it meant to give my father or to manipulate him into thinking he could do something or that he gave something to me, because the minute he gave something to me, there was always an expectation that somehow I would have to give something back that was greater than what I was comfortable with. And the final thing I'm going to say today is sometimes the reality is the last strategy, the last tactic for you is to plan your exit. And, sometimes the best strategy is knowing when to walk away, right? When to just stop trying to work in an environment that is taking a lot away from you physically, physiologically. Your mental health, your physical health is just not worth that toxic environment, right? If it's beyond your repair, then you need to start looking at preparing for your own exit strategy. So this could be really difficult. If you're the chairman of the board and your CEO is the toxic leader, it can make leaving very difficult. There's a couple of things that come into play, right? You might feel guilty about leaving. You might feel like you're letting people down if you leave. But ultimately, at the end of the day, you have to think about what's best for you, ultimately, because you have a family, you have friends, you have a life outside of the workplace, and you have your own health and well-being to think about. So what are some things that you're going to need to do to start thinking about that exit strategy? So a couple of things I want to state on that is, if you're unable to find a lateral move and you now have to look outside of your organization, I'm going to say a couple things. One is, if you're looking to just become another employee somewhere else, you may want to do this quietly, kind of on the quote down low, right? Because you're going to want to make sure that this narcissist doesn't clue in to you wanting to leave, because they're going to see it as a form of being disloyal to them, and they will take it as a personal affront that you're leaving, and may be concerned about what you don't know about an organization, etc. They may find a way to fire you sooner. So if that's a risk that you're not willing to take, you're going to need to be a little bit quieter about your impending departure. You're going to want to, of course, update your resume, build connections outside the organization, maybe go to some networking events, talk to family members, that kind of thing. And if you're looking to develop your own business or leave it to be a consultant, I'm going to say that you're going to need at least 12 to 18 months worth of income protection for yourself, because that's as long as it can take for a business to start to even make any kind of money. More like 3 to 5 years to be very successful in most businesses, according to the statistics. But I can tell you from my own personal experience, it could take a couple of years for you to make any kind of money. And so make sure you have a financial runway long enough to provide you that security if you decide to just up and quit and then start something on your own. So no matter what the strategies you use are, the one thing that's crucial is that you have to protect your own energy in this entire situation. So building resilience is partly about taking the power back for yourself. So you cannot let the narcissist define your self-worth, because their perception of you is a reflection of them and their insecurities, not about you and your truth. This is a hard pill to swallow when you're in the middle of it, because you're being abused essentially. And when we're being abused, we sometimes believe the abuser. But the reality is that they are not your self-worth. They are not what is going to define your future. You need to prioritize your mental and emotional well-being. So find safe spaces outside of work where you can recharge, things that don't drain you. So in other words, don't go on TikTok or other social media platforms and be taken down by the various stresses of the world that is unfolding as we speak. You need to develop a form of detachment, the ability to detach yourself from them, because the power you give them over your emotions, the more of that you give them, the more control they have over you, and the easier it is to manipulate you. You want to take that power back. So form detachment, meaning do not get attached to every single thing that comes out of their mouth. You need to take the power back when it comes to that. So if you take one thing from today's episode, let it be this. Narcissistic leaders only have the power if you let them dictate the terms of engagement. So leaders only have the power that you let them have over you. The moment you start playing by your rules, setting boundaries, documenting facts, protecting your energy, developing alliances, you start to shift that power dynamic. You can disable them. You can destabilize them. I know this isn't easy, but you are not powerless. That is a lie that they have you believing. You are not powerless. And if this episode spoke to you and you're navigating the workplace with a leader like this, share it with someone who might need this information. Because the more we understand these dynamics, the less control they have over all of us. Until the next time, folks, stay inspired, stay grounded, and remember to exhale. Thank you so much for listening to the Executive Exhale podcast. I hope you're leaving with a little more clarity and maybe a few more tools to help you breathe easier in your leadership role. If this episode resonated with you, don't forget to hit subscribe, leave a quick review, and share it with a colleague or friend who might need to hear this. We're all in this together, and sometimes we just need a reminder to exhale. And hey, if you're looking for more support, head over to www.executiveexhale.com, where you'll find resources and ways to work with me or my team directly. Until next time, take care, keep breathing, and remember, you got this.